611 votes cast. 611 votes counted. And still I'm the one who has to stand here and explain why the number on the board doesn't match the number of seats in this chamber.
I hate this part of the job. My mandibles click against the podium, a nervous habit I've had for 400 cycles and never once broken, and the sound echoes up through the Corvette Assembly Hall like a judge's gavel. 9 tiers of delegates ring the chamber above me, scales and carapaces and breathing membranes from 41 worlds, all of them staring down at the tally sphere hovering at the center of the floor. It glows a soft, patient blue, waiting for its 612th vote. There isn't one. Species tier reclassification, motion 442. I say because someone has to say it out loud, and because I am the recorder of this assembly, sworn by the Compact of Vranu to speak the truth of every vote whether I like it or not. Subject, designation Homo sapiens. Motion, full retroactive erasure from the Unified Historical Ledger. Category, non-contributory extinct species, Tier 0. Tier 0. The lowest classification the ledger has. Lower than bacterial mats. Lower than the moss colonies of Threna Minor that at least fixed nitrogen for 4 billion years before anyone noticed them. Tier 0 means, this species did nothing, went nowhere, mattered to no one, and does not deserve to be remembered as having existed at all. I did not write this motion. I only have to read it, and here is the claim I would have made an hour ago before any of this started. The claim I believed the way I believe the sun will rise over Corveth Prime tomorrow. Humanity was nothing. A blip. A species that clawed itself up out of mud on a single fragile rock, burned through its own atmosphere in a geological eye blink, and went extinct before it ever left its own star system in any way that mattered. We have a saying on my world, the loud ones die first, and by every metric my species uses to measure the loud ones, humanity screamed the loudest and vanished the fastest. 900 years since their sun swallowed what was left of them. 900 years and not one interstellar colony, not one lasting alliance, not one entry in the ledger worth the ink. I believed that an hour ago. I do not believe it now. Because 611 votes are in and the number that should be 612 is sitting empty on the board, glowing that same patient blue, waiting. 1 seat, 1 species, 1 vote missing, and I'm about to find out why. Recorder. Chief Delegate Ashkun's voice cuts across the chamber floor, 4 of her 7 eyes fixed on the tally sphere, the other 3 fixed on me. Ashkun has sat the high seat for longer than most species in this room have had writing. She does not like surprises. Explain the discrepancy. Working on it, Chief Delegate. I pull up the roll. 612 seats in the Corveth Assembly. 612 species withstanding to vote on matters of the Unified Historical Ledger. I run the list. 611 confirmed. 1 seat listed as vacant, pending verification. Species designation next to it, Homo sapiens. The chamber goes very quiet, in that specific way a room goes quiet when several hundred beings realize simultaneously that something is wrong, and none of them want to be the first to say so. That's not possible, I say mostly to myself. You can't vote on your own erasure. That seat should have been struck from the roll the moment this motion was filed. It was struck, says Delegate Vren of the Osanti Concord, 4 tiers up, his vocal sac inflating with the particular irritation of a bureaucrat watching a form get filled out wrong. I filed the strike myself, 8 cycles ago. Then why, I say, does the system still list it as a pending seat instead of a closed one? Nobody answers. Because nobody knows. I do the only thing a recorder is trained to do when the record contradicts itself. I go to the source. I pull the seat's registration file, the one buried under 9 centuries of inactive status flags, and I open it. It should be empty. 900 years empty, a grave marker in database form. Instead, at the very bottom, time-stamped 6 hours ago, 6 hours, while this assembly session was already in progress, there's a new entry, credential submitted, seat claimed, delegate en route. I read it twice. Then a third time, because my eyes are very good, and they do not make this kind of mistake. and I need them to have made this kind of mistake. They haven't. Chief Delegate, I say, and I notice distantly that my voice has lost its bureaucratic flatness. We have a problem. Someone just claimed the human seat. Today, while we were in session. Ashkun goes very still, all 7 eyes locking onto me at once, which for a Rixa is the physical equivalent of a held breath. Humanity is extinct, she says. It's not a question. It's a fact she's reciting the way you recite gravity. Yes, I say. Extinct species do not submit credentials. No, I say. They don't. The chamber doors, 11 meters of reinforced Thren alloy, doors that have not opened outside of scheduled session in 400 cycles, begin very slowly to open. Erased. Not conquered. Erased. That's the word the motion uses. That's the word I was about to certify. Someone forgot to check if the grave was actually full. The figure that walks through those doors is small. That's the first thing every delegate in this chamber registers. I can feel it ripple through the tiers like a physical current. Small. No armor plating, no exoskeleton, no membrane, no scale, no chitin. Soft-looking, in the way that makes half the predatory species in this room's ancestry twitch with something between contempt and confusion. 2 arms, 2 legs. A face built almost entirely out of soft tissue with nothing to protect it. By every visual metric, this species should not have survived its own homeworld's breakfast food chain, let alone the galaxy. She stops in the center of the floor beneath the tally sphere and looks up at 611 delegates from 41 worlds, and she does not flinch. Delegate for Homo sapiens, she says. Her voice is calm, not defiant calm, not performing bravery. Just calm, the way people are calm when they've already done the hard part, and this is just the paperwork. I believe you're voting on whether I ever existed. That's either madness or the greatest deception in history. I mutter because it's the only sentence that fits, and Ashkun's eyes flick to me sharply enough that I know she heard it, and honestly, I don't take it back. Records, Ashkun says instead, addressing the human directly now, her 400 cycles of authority compressed into 2 words. Prove your species has standing. Prove you are not a fraud, a construct, or a delegate for a species that no longer exists to be represented. The human, her registration file names her delegate Reyes, first name withheld per human diplomatic protocol, a protocol nobody in this room has seen invoked in 9 centuries, reaches into a satchel at her hip and pulls out a data core the size of a fist.
Wait, if you reach this part of story, then please like and subscribe the channel. Your 1 click means a lot to us.
I have 300 years of it, she says. Pick a place to start. Ashkun's mandible analog twitches. Start, she says, with why your species is extinct at all if you're so eager to be remembered. And Reyes, this small, soft, unarmored thing standing alone in a chamber built to hold the weight of 41 civilizations' judgment, smiles. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile you smile when someone's just asked a question they don't understand the shape of. We're not, she says. That's the part your ledger got wrong. The chamber erupts. Ashkun has to strike the resonance bar 3 times to bring it back to order, and even then the noise doesn't fully die. It just drops to a simmer, 600 delegates murmuring in 41 languages, and I realize my hands are shaking against the podium, because I have recorded 11,000 assembly sessions in my 400 cycles, and I have never seen the record contradict itself this badly. The data core goes into the projection well. Light blooms up from the floor. A world, blue and brown and streaked with white. Familiar in the way every terrestrial world is familiar, except for the numbers scrolling beside it, and the numbers are wrong. The numbers cannot possibly be right. Surface temperature swings of 90 degrees between poles and equator. 70% of the surface actively hostile to unmodified biology. Liquid, saline, crushing. Predator density in the remaining 30% so high that the species' own historical record classifies most of its early millennia as unbroken emergency. This is where you're from? Vren asks, vocal sac deflating slightly. This is survivable? Barely, Reyes says. For about 300,000 years, barely. Second reveal. War records. Not one war. Not 10. A ledger. An actual ledger, longer than ours, more detailed than ours, of conflicts humanity fought against itself, tallying into the tens of thousands across recorded history, and threaded through every single one of them the same footnote, repeated so many times it stops looking like a footnote and starts looking like a species trait. Survived, rebuilt, continued. Not once. Every time. Third reveal. A century. Just 1 century out of their whole run, where humanity nearly ends itself twice by its own hand and gets shoved backward by disease, by climate collapse, by war on a scale that should by every model in the unified ledger produce total extinction, and instead produces 40 years later, machines that leave their own atmosphere. That's not possible, I hear myself say again out loud this time. And I don't care that it's unprofessional because the numbers are right there and they still don't make sense. That timeline that's not a stable growth curve. That's not how surviving works. No, Reyes agrees. It's not. We didn't survive by being stable. Gut punch. One line, and the whole chamber goes quiet around it. We survived by refusing to stop. Fourth reveal. And this is the one that does it. This is the one that turns the murmur and the tears into total silence. Because Reyes pulls up footage now, not numbers, footage. Grainy and old and human shot from a human hand. And it's a small boat, unbelievably small, on water that should have killed everyone in it in minutes, crossing an ocean because the land behind them was worse than the water in front. 1 vote, Reyes says quietly over the footage. That's all it took to erase all of this. 1 motion. 611 delegates who never had to ask whether their planet wanted them dead. I look at the tally sphere. 611 votes. Every single one of them cast by a species whose homeworld, by the ledger's own environmental hazard index, scores in the benign or cooperative range. Every one of them except this one. Every one of them except us, sitting up there in judgment, never having survived a single day of what this footage is showing. Ashkun raises a hand, 3 fingers, the Rixa gesture for halt, and the footage freezes mid-frame, that small boat suspended forever in that impossible water. This is theater, she says, and there's an edge in her voice now that wasn't there before. Something defensive dressed up as authority. Compelling theater. But footage can be constructed. Numbers can be curated. You have given us a highlight reel of your species' survival instinct, Delegate Reyes, not proof of contribution. The ledger does not erase species for being weak. It erases species that left nothing behind for anyone but themselves. It's the sharpest thing anyone said all session, and for the first time Reyes goes quiet. For a full 3 seconds nobody in the chamber breathes. Then she nods, slowly, like she respects the hit. Fair, she says. That's a fair challenge. Let me answer it properly. She doesn't reach for the data core this time. She steps forward instead, past the projection well, closer to the base of Ashkun's high seat, close enough that the chief delegate's honor guard shifts, plates sliding audibly into ready position, and Reyes doesn't so much as glance at them. You want to know what we left behind, she says, not what we survived. What we gave. Yes, Ashkun says. There's a reason your seat registry still had a slot for us, Reyes says. A reason it never fully closed in 900 years, no matter how many times someone tried to strike it. Recorder. And she turns and looks directly at me, and I feel every delegate in the chamber turn with her. Pull the founding charter of the Unified Ledger. Article 1. Read it. My hands move before I decide to let them. Old muscle memory, older than my objections. Article 1 of the Unified Historical Ledger, written 1100 years ago before I was even hatched. Words so foundational that most delegates haven't thought about their literal text in centuries because everyone assumes they know what it says. I read it out loud, and my voice catches halfway through. Because I do know what it says. I've just never once connected it to anything in this room. This ledger exists to record the contributions of every species who, at cost to themselves, extended aid, knowledge, or shelter to another species in crisis, that such acts not be forgotten by the beneficiaries of them. The chamber is silent again. A different kind of silent. At cost to themselves, Reyes repeats. Extended aid, to another species. In crisis. She looks around the tiers, slow, deliberate, meeting eyes, actual eyes, compound eyes, no eyes, whatever each delegate has. Species by species. Oh, Santi Concord, she says. Plague year 410 cycles ago. Your medical fleet grounded, your worlds burning through population in the millions, no cure in your own archive. Someone got you one. Anonymous shipment. No trade demanded. Cure arrived 11 days before your own scientists would have finished it independently. 11 days that your own records say saved 40 million lives. Your historians logged the origin point of that cure as unknown. Vren's vocal sac has gone completely still. It wasn't unknown, Reyes says. It came from a research outpost with a crew of 6 humans 400 light-years off their own supply lines, who intercepted your distress beacon and had nothing to gain and everything to lose by answering it. They didn't file for credit, they just sent the cure and kept flying. She turns. Threnna Minor. Your moss colonies, recorder. The ones I heard someone in this chamber compare us to earlier, unfavorably. Her eyes find mine, and I feel my mandibles go still. Those colonies were dying. A saltwater incursion nobody on Threnna Minor could stop with the technology you had 400 years ago. A human survey ship rerouted a full cycle off its assigned course to reseed your coastal barriers. No one asked them to. It cost them the survey contract that was their entire reason for being out there. Enough, Ashkun says, but her voice has lost its edge. It's not a command anymore. It's something closer to a request. One more, Reyes says gently now. Not gloating, almost sad. You, Chief Delegate, 480 cycles ago, before your seat, when the Rixa homeworld's grain blight nearly ended your species outright. Ashkun's 7 eyes go very, very still. I know that record, she says quietly. There is no origin listed for the resistant seed strain that saved us. It's marked donor species unrecorded by donor's own request. They asked not to be named, Reyes says. It wasn't modesty. It's because at the time humanity hadn't been granted formal contact status with your species yet. If they'd claimed credit, it would have triggered a first contact review that would have delayed the shipment by 6 months. Your species didn't have 6 months. Silence. The kind of silence that isn't empty. The kind that's full, packed tight with something the whole chamber is realizing at once. And none of them know how to say out loud. So don't tell me, Reyes says quiet now. No theater left in her voice at all. That we left nothing behind but ourselves. Ashkun doesn't speak for a long moment. When she does, her voice is lower than I have ever heard it in 400 cycles of recording this chamber. Recorder, cross-reference. Every unlisted donor entry in the ledger going back 900 years. Species designation. Search for pattern match against Delegate Reyes's data core. My claws move across the console faster than I've ever moved them. The tally sphere flickers, drops its patient blue and starts pulling threads. Dozens of them, then hundreds. Small, unremarkable footnotes scattered across 9 centuries of ledger entries, all of them tagged donor unrecorded or origin unconfirmed or anonymous humanitarian action. All of them lighting up gold across the projection field, one after another, until the chamber floor is a constellation of them. 412 entries. 412 times. Across 900 years. This species we were about to certify as Tier 0, non-contributory, unworthy of memory, reached out to someone else's crisis and asked for nothing back. Sometimes secretly, sometimes at direct cost to their own survival. Records show entire outposts stripped of resources to answer a distress call that wasn't theirs to answer. 412 times. That's more anonymous aid entries than any other species in the ledger. More than us, more than the Asanti, more than anyone. We were about to erase the single most generous species in 900 years of recorded galactic history, and we almost did it, because no one bothered to check why the seat wasn't empty. They never asked for the seat, I say, and I realize I'm speaking directly to the chamber now off script, the recorder's neutrality cracking wide open, and I don't try to stop it. 412 acts of aid, across 9 centuries, and not once did anyone file for ledger credit. They only claimed the seat today, when they found out we were about to erase them completely. Why? Ashkun says, and she's looking at Reyes now. Not with authority, with something closer to genuine bewilderment. Why now? If you never wanted the credit before? Reyes is quiet for a moment. When she answers, there's no theater in it at all. Just something tired and honest and very, very human. Because being forgotten was fine, she says. We chose that most of those 412 times. But being erased is different. Erased means it never happened. Erased means the next species that comes to your borders bleeding and asking for help doesn't get a ledger entry to point to and say someone like you helped someone like them once. It means the next crew that has to decide whether answering a distress call is worth the cost has one less reason to say yes. She looks around the chamber, slow, steady. We didn't come back for credit, she says. We came back because erasing the record doesn't just erase us. It erases the proof that it's worth doing. And I wasn't going to let that happen while there was still one vote left to cast. The tally sphere pulses, waiting. 611 votes locked in favor of erasure. One seat finally formally open. Recorder, Ashkun says, and her voice carries the full weight of 400 cycles of authority. But for the first time all session, it's pointed somewhere other than down. Strike motion 442, all of it, every clause. Chief Delegate, Vren starts. I said strike it, Ashkun says, and there isn't a delegate in this chamber, from any of 41 worlds, who doesn't recognize the sound of a decision that isn't up for debate. And when it's struck, I want a new motion filed. Species designation, Homo sapiens. Reclassification, Tier 1. Category, continuous contributor, founding signatory status, founding signatory. That designation hasn't been granted in 600 years. It means the ledger itself acknowledges your species helped hold the structure of it together, not just filled a line in it. One vote, I say, and this time when I say it, it isn't a lament. It's a fact, and it's a good one. That's all it took. Ashkun looks at me, all 7 eyes, fully open, fully present, and for the first time in this entire session, she almost smiles. Cast it, recorder, she says. It's your vote, too. I have never in 400 cycles cast a vote in this chamber. Recorders don't vote. It isn't in the compact. I find, in this moment, that I don't care. My claw hovers over the console. The tally sphere brightens. Not the patient waiting blue anymore. Something warmer, something that looks almost like it's listening. I cast it. 612. The chamber doesn't erupt this time. It does something better. It goes quiet and then slowly from tier to tier, 611 delegates from 41 worlds. Predators and philosophers and bureaucrats and survivors, every one of them owing something to a species they were about to pretend never existed. Begin, one at a time, to stand. The chamber empties slower than it fills. It always does. The ceremony of leaving takes longer than the ceremony of arriving, in every species I've ever recorded. But tonight it's slower than usual. Delegates lingering in small clusters near the base of the tiers, murmuring in low voices, several of them glancing toward the center of the floor where Reyes is packing the data core back into her satchel, like she's just finished an ordinary day at work, instead of rewriting 900 years of ledger history. I should be filing the amended record. That's the job. That's always the job. Instead, I find myself walking down onto the chamber floor, which recorders don't do, and standing across from her, which I've genuinely never done with a delegate in 400 cycles of service. You cut it close, I say. It's not what I meant to say, it's what comes out. Reyes huffs something that might be a laugh. We usually do, 6 hours. I shake my head, mandibles clicking in a way that for my species is the equivalent of a rueful smile. Your credential was filed 6 hours before the vote closed, If this session had run short instead of long, it would have been close, she agrees. It's always close. That's kind of the whole track record, if you noticed. I did notice. 412 entries of close. An entire species whose defining trait, as far as I can tell from one very long evening of records I should have read a long time ago, is showing up exactly late enough that it terrifies everyone watching and exactly early enough that it works anyway. Can I ask you something, I say, as recorder, off the transcript? She nods. Why now specifically? You could have claimed this seat any time in the last 900 years. Filed for tier reclassification, gotten ahead of a motion like this before it was ever drafted. Why wait until the vote was 611-0 and the doors were about to close for good? Reyes is quiet for a second. When she answers, it's not defensive. It's just true. Because we're not great, she says, at showing up before the crisis. We're pretty good historically at showing up right when it matters and not a moment sooner. I'm not going to pretend that's a strategy. It's what we do. It's what we've always done. That's either madness, I say, quoting myself from an hour ago that feels like a different lifetime, or it's just how we survive, she finishes. It's not a deception, recorder, it never was. We just don't perform the fight before we have to. We save it for when it counts. I look at the tally sphere, still glowing that warm, listening light behind her. 612 votes locked into a ledger that will read differently, permanently, from tonight forward. I think about 412 acts of aid nobody asked to be thanked for. I think about a species that crossed oceans that should have killed them, in boats that shouldn't have floated, because the alternative was worse, and then turned around centuries later and did the same thing for other people's oceans. For what it's worth, I say, I'm glad the vote count was wrong. It wasn't wrong, Reyes says. It was just waiting on us. Same as always. She extends a hand. The human gesture. I know this now. I looked it up mid-session out of pure reflex while the chamber was still in shock. A gesture of goodwill that requires you to offer your most vulnerable limb, unarmored, unprotected, directly into someone else's grip, and trust that they won't do anything with it. I don't have hands built for the gesture. I improvise. She doesn't seem to mind. Recorder, she says, thank you for reading the fine print. Thank you, I say, for showing up. She smiles, a real one, this time, tired and warm, and turns to go, satchel over her shoulder. Footsteps unhurried across a chamber floor that, 900 years ago, this species didn't even have a door into. I watch her all the way to the exit. Then I go back to my podium and I open a fresh page in the unified historical ledger, and for the first time in 400 cycles, I don't write the entry the way protocol tells me to. I write it the way it actually happened. 611 votes to erase, 1 vote missing. It arrived exactly when it needed to, and not a moment before, and that was enough. I close the file. Behind me, the chamber lights begin to dim for the night, tier by tier, until only the tally sphere is still glowing. Soft and warm, and no longer waiting on anyone,